All right, the next thing I want to talk about, insider trading with the Trump administration, the people in the White House.
That's not
This
happening.
is
How dare you
this
question authority?
this is something that most people have kind of suspected for a while, but I think there hasn't really been irrefutable proof until now. But here's what
Mhm.
happened. On Monday, about 16 minutes before Trump announced that the the US and Iran had productive conversations and used the words a complete and total resolution of our hostilities, there were hundreds of millions of dollars, about $580 million of oil trades that were placed. Now, this was before 7 a.m., a
Mhm.
time in the market when it's dead. There is no activity. So this was very evident. And whoever made those trades made a lot of money or
Mhm.
saved themselves from losing a lot of money. Oil prices dropped 10% just a little bit later, right after Trump made the announcement. Very
Okay.
curious timing. It's almost like somebody knew this was going to happen. Now, here's the thing. I've long had suspicions of this, and I think a lot of people have, because last
Yeah.
year, especially when Trump was going crazy with tariffs, he would be like, okay, 50% tariffs across the board, blah. And then the markets would be like, oh my God, what the fuck? And then the next day or 2 days later, he'd be like, okay, actually, we're going to give these countries another 90 days to come to the table and blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah. And then the markets would go back up. We always suspected that somebody knew that was happening and could, place trades accordingly, right? Either going to buy or
Mhm.
sell oil futures or stocks based on whatever he's going to say. But it wasn't really like any kind of smoking gun. This is a smoking gun. Somebody knew.
Okay.
Somebody
So,
inside had to have known. There is no other explanation for this.
so I
The
need
only
to ask you a
question is
couple of
who.
questions. I need to ask you a couple of questions because I assume that if I don't know a couple of details here or don't understand a few parts of the story, then maybe somebody's listening who doesn't quite know what some of these things mean. So, what are futures as it pertains to oil? Talk to me
It's
about
it's
futures.
it's basically just a security that a lot gives you a contract to buy oil at a certain price in the future, right? So if you buy it, you basically lock in a certain price now, and then the value of that, goes up or down depending on what the actual price of oil does after. So if
Yeah,
I buy futures for oil at like $90
a
a
barrel.
barrel right now, and it goes down to $80 a barrel, my futures are losing a lot of money, right? They're not
Yeah.
worth as much. And so it's really, don't worry about whether I don't say to everyone listening, don't worry about what a future is. It's basically like, think of it like an oil stock, right? For lack of a better term. It's just
Okay.
something where some kind of security that you can trade that has a value that's tied to oil.
Okay. And so are the markets even open at 7 a.m. Eastern? How can you place $580 million in trades
The
that
markets aren't
early?
open, but there's well, the US markets aren't open, but there's the pre-market, there's the overnight market, there's foreign markets. So, there's plenty
Okay.
of markets are 24 hours a day. If you
Okay.
have the right tools, you can trade, you can make money.
Okay.
And I think the key is here that it was so blatant and obvious. Whoever did this fucked up because
Hmm.
if he had given the speech 3 hours later, right, 10 a.m. Eastern, there would have been probably no suspicion because there's so much market activity at that time, especially on a Monday, because there's
Yeah.
all these trades going through that are activated automatically and stuff. So nobody would have noticed. At
Yeah.
6:45 a.m. or whatever it was, 6:50 a.m., it was obvious. And here's the thing that I love about this. It doesn't matter what they do now. It doesn't matter if they don't ever repeat this mistake again. That smoking gun is permanent. One day, somehow, we will figure out who was behind this. The only question left
How?
is who. The same way the SEC invests all kinds of insider training. The same way they got Martha Stewart in prison. I mean, they have the ability to investigate this stuff. They could, find what was traded, which exchange it was traded on, who the hell owned those shares. And I mean, it's not like it's a pretty clear trail.
But
It's not
isn't
like you
that
could do this in
is that
secrecy.
is that information public already if we already know that it happened? Or do we just know that it happened, but we don't know any other details surrounding
There are there are
$580
some
million
pieces of
worth?
public information that you might be able to see, but it's not guaranteed that it's public. But for the SEC to find this out, it's really not that hard. This isn't like crypto, and this isn't like something you can do in secrecy. Like, so it's just a question of who's going to enforce it. It's not going to be this SEC,
I was going to
but
say, yeah, not under
maybe.
this current administration. That would be like them, investigating themselves, I would assume. Because this has to
Exactly.
be somebody with insider knowledge, right? Somebody who knew that Trump was going to say this.
100%. There is literally no other explanation. You couldn't possibly have been that right at that time
Yeah.
when nobody else was trading and you were the one person who just got this fucking divine inspiration to do this. No.
Yeah.
Like, and that's how the SEC goes after insider trading. They look for anomalies. This is not just an anomaly. This is like the mother of all anomalies.
Yeah.
And so,
But
like I said, I just want to
this
see justice here. I want to see them. They fucked up. They backed themselves into a corner, and they'll never get out of it. They better pray that Trump pardons them, whoever they are, preemptively.
Well, so this also fits into a pattern. I mean, there were people placing bets on the fact that Maduro would get deposed of power in Venezuela, like the day of, I think, or the day before. Delta Force operators went into, what was it, Caracas in January and abducted him and took him to a court in New York and, locked him up. There have been lots of people making bets on Polymarket and on Kalshi pertaining to things that the White House does, where only somebody on the inside could have had information about how those things were going to turn out. They make an account a couple of days before, they place the bet, it turns out exactly the way they predicted, they cash out, and then the account gets deleted. Like the length of Caroline Leavitt's speeches from the podium at the White House, press briefings, things like that. These
That was
things
the
have been
most
happening.
obvious one. That was
Oh
like,
yeah,
that was just so weird and obvious. And
as it should be.
so, you know what? They better hope they get a pardon preemptively, whoever this is. And
They probably will.
I just want to see.
No, this administration, they probably will.
I don't think they will, because I think that then that would be admitting that they did something. And
Yeah.
look, I'm not like an expert on politics, so I don't want to present myself as such. But one thing that Trump does often is he lets people do shady shit, knowing about it, allowing them to, and then when it's convenient for him, decides to use that to hang them. He did this to
Oh
Kristi Noem.
yeah. Of
He knew,
course.
he had to have known that she was doing that bullshit with self-dealing a DHS advertising contract to
For like
one of her
$200
friends.
million.
Yeah, right. It was just a bullshit like use of money anyway, but then to give it to your friend,
Whose
like,
company was incorporated 8 days before the contract went out. It was a no bid contract, I think.
yeah, and is the husband of somebody who works for her.
Yeah.
So, like, he probably knew about that, but then when things started to get a little sideways for her, then he was like, okay, we're going to use that as pretext to get you out of here. And that's what they did.
Yeah.
Even though he acted like he didn't know about it. But then when the time came, oh, you were doing this? Here's your noose. Go hang yourself. So I don't know. I'm optimistic.